Sarah Mitchell had worked 1,247 shifts as a nurse at Mercy General Hospital in her 5 years on the medical surgical floor. She remembered this because she kept count of each exhausting 12-hour day, each patient saved, each small victory against suffering. She had perfected the balance between clinical efficiency and genuine compassion, moving through her shifts with practiced grace. But on Tuesday morning, when she arrived for her 7 a.m. shift and saw the woman in the gray coat sitting motionless in the second-floor hallway outside the nurse's station, Sarah's carefully structured routine shattered. The visitor carried no flowers, spoke no words, and held in her trembling hands an envelope that would unravel 30 years of silence.
Quick pause. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. The fluorescent lights in the medical surgical wing hummed their perpetual song, a sound Sarah had long stopped hearing. She walked briskly toward the nurse's station, her white shoes squeaking softly on the linoleum, her navy blue scrubs crisp and professional. Tuesday morning stretched before her with predictable intensity. Medication rounds, wound care, patient assessments, the constant dance between efficiency and empathy. But as Sarah approached the nurse's station, she noticed the woman sitting in one of the visitors' chairs positioned along the hallway wall. The woman sat unnaturally still, her hands clutching a manila envelope against her chest, her eyes fixed on Sarah with unnerving intensity. Sarah had seen thousands of visitors in her 5 years at Mercy General. Worried family members, exhausted spouses, frightened children. But this woman was different. She moved with peculiar stillness, as though any motion might shatter her fragile frame. She appeared to be in her early 70s, thin to the point of frailty, wearing a gray coat that had seen better decades. Her eyes, dark, fierce, burning, followed Sarah's every movement. Sarah set down her bag at the nurse's station and approached the woman with professional concern. "Good morning. Are you waiting for someone? Can I help you find a patient's room?" The woman said nothing. She simply stared, those burning eyes scanning Sarah's face with desperate thoroughness, as though memorizing every feature. Sarah felt unease prickle along her spine. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" Still silence. The woman's hands trembled, the envelope rustling with the movement. Behind her, the morning shift was arriving, other nurses greeting each other, computers logging in, the ordinary sounds of a hospital day beginning. But here, in this small pocket of hallway, tension built like a gathering storm. "Do you need me to call someone for you?" Sarah tried again, her nurse's instinct telling her something was profoundly wrong. The woman's jaw worked, lips parting as though forming words that refused to emerge. Then with a sudden decisive movement, she stood and placed the envelope in Sarah's hands. Sarah looked down. The envelope was old, yellowed at the edges, sealed with tape that had begun to peel. Written across the front in careful block letters were the words, "Dr. Marion Hayes, personal and confidential." "You want me to give this to Dr. Hayes? Are you a patient? Do you have an appointment?" The woman nodded once, a sharp downward jerk of her head, then pointed emphatically at the envelope, then towards the administrative wing. "Okay, but I'll need to get some information from you first." But the woman's hand shot out, gripping Sarah's wrist with surprising strength. Sarah gasped, more from shock than pain, and found herself staring into those fierce eyes from mere inches away. The woman shook her head violently, then released Sarah's wrist and pointed again at the envelope with desperate insistence. "All right," Sarah said slowly, her training taking over. The woman clearly was unable or unwilling to speak, possibly in some kind of crisis. "I'll take it to Dr. Hayes right away, but you need to stay here, okay? Wait in this chair. I'll be right back." The woman nodded and sat back down, her entire body rigid with tension. Sarah looked at the envelope in her hands, feeling its weight. Something small and hard shifted inside. She turned to her colleague, Marcus, who was setting up for morning rounds. "Can you keep an eye on that woman? She seems distressed.
I need to run something to administration. Marcus glanced at the woman and nodded. Sure thing. You okay, Sarah? You look pale. I'm fine. Just something feels off about this. Sarah walked quickly towards the administration wing, the envelope growing heavier with each step. Dr. Marion Hayes was the hospital administrator, a woman whose authority was absolute and whose reputation was impeachable. Sarah had only interacted with her a handful of times in 5 years. Hayes operated in a different sphere, far above the day-to-day concerns of floor nurses. She climbed the stairs to the second-floor administrative offices and knocked on her door. Come in. Dr. Hayes sat behind her massive desk, reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewing budget reports. She looked up as Sarah entered, her expression shifting from administrative focus to polite inquiry. Sarah Mitchell, isn't it? Medical Surgical Wing. What can I do for you? I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Hayes. There's a woman on our floor. She can't or won't speak, but she insisted I deliver this to you personally. It's marked personal and confidential. Dr. Hayes' eyes dropped to the envelope, and her entire body went rigid. The color drained from her face with such speed that Sarah instinctively stepped forward, her nurse's assessment kicking in. Signs of shock, possible cardiac event, need to monitor. Dr. Hayes, are you all right? Should I get you some water? The administrator's hand trembled as she reached for the envelope. She took it, her fingers tracing the handwriting on the front as though reading Braille. For a long moment she simply stared at it, her breathing shallow and rapid. This woman, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What does she look like? Sarah described her. The gray coat, the thin frame, the fierce eyes, the approximate age, the inability to speak. Dr. Hayes closed her eyes. She's still on your floor. Yes, ma'am. I asked her to wait. Sarah, I need you to do something for me. Dr. Hayes opened her eyes, and Sarah was startled to see they glistened with unshed tears. I need you to make her comfortable. Get her whatever she needs, but do not let her leave the floor. Do you understand? Do not let her leave the building. Should I call security or a doctor? She seems like she might be in crisis. No. The word came out sharp, almost panicked. No security reports, no incident logs, nothing in the system, Sarah. This is a strictly personal matter. Dr. Hayes stood, the envelope clutched in both hands. I'll be down shortly. Just keep her there and keep this quiet. Can you do that for me? Sarah nodded, confusion and concern warring inside her. Of course, Dr. Hayes. Thank you, Sarah. And Sarah, I fixed her with an intense stare. Not a word to anyone about this. Not nurses, not doctors, not staff. This is confidential. Am I clear? Yes, ma'am.
Sarah left the office, her mind racing. In 5 years of nursing, she had seen administrators handle crises with cool professionalism. But Dr. Hayes' reaction had been visceral, almost fearful. Who was this woman? What was in that envelope? When Sarah returned to the medical surgical floor, she found the woman still sitting in the same chair, but now she was writing frantically in a small notepad. As Sarah approached, the woman looked up and held out the notepad. I need to see her, the woman had written in large, shaky letters. Dr. Hayes is coming down, Sarah said gently. Can I get you something to drink while you wait? Some water or coffee? The woman shook her head, then wrote again. I just need to wait. I've been waiting 30 years. 30 years. The word sent a chill through Sarah. She pulled up a chair and sat beside the woman, close enough to offer support, but not so close as to crowd her. My name is Sarah. I'm a nurse here. Whatever you're going through, you're not alone, okay? The woman turned to look at her, and tears began streaming down her weathered cheeks. She wrote, Thank you. You have kind eyes, like her. Like who? Sarah asked softly. But the woman just shook her head and returned to staring at the hallway that led to the administrative wing. 23 minutes passed. Sarah stayed with the woman, occasionally checking her watch, concerned about her assigned patients, but unwilling to leave this visitor alone. Other staff members passed by, giving curious glances, but Sarah waved them off with subtle gestures. At 7:48 a.m., Dr. Hayes emerged from the stairwell. She had changed from her usual professional attire into a simple sweater and slacks, as though preparing for something other than administrative work. Her face was pale but composed. her shoulders set with grim determination. The woman in the gray coat saw her immediately. She stood, her legs trembling, and for a moment Sarah thought she might collapse. Sarah reached out to steady her, but the woman waved her off gently. Dr. Hayes walked across the hallway with measured steps, stopping 3 feet away from the woman. They stared at each other in absolute silence. Sarah watched, barely breathing, as something passed between them. Recognition, accusation, grief, something too complex to name. Then Dr. Hayes spoke, her voice carrying across the quiet hallway with terrible clarity. "Janet, I never thought I'd see you again." The woman, Janet, opened her mouth, and Sarah saw her throat work with effort, but no sound emerged. Instead, she reached into her pocket and withdrew the notepad, writing quickly before holding it up. Sarah couldn't read the words from her position, but she saw Dr. Hayes' face crumple, saw her hand rise to cover her mouth. The administrator looked away, blinking rapidly, then looked back at Janet with something that might have been terror or relief or both. "We need to talk," Dr. Hayes said, "but not here. Come with me." She reached out to take Janet's arm, but Janet stepped back sharply, shaking her head. She wrote again, her movements agitated, then thrust the notepad toward Dr. Hayes. Dr. Hayes read it and went even paler. "That's not possible." Janet nodded violently, then turned and pointed directly at Sarah. Both women looked at her, and Sarah felt her stomach drop. Dr. Hayes' expression was of absolute horror. Janet looked desperate, pleading. "No," Dr. Hayes whispered. "No, that's... Sarah, I need you to go check on your patients, now." "Dr. Hayes, what's going on?" Sarah stood, her instincts screaming that something was profoundly wrong. "That's an order, Nurse Mitchell." The administrator's voice shook. "Go, now." Sarah stood frozen. Janet shook her head frantically and began writing again, her pen moving so fast it tore through the paper. But Dr. Hayes snatched the notepad away. "Stop, please. Just stop." She looked at Sarah, and her expression held something Sarah had never seen before. Raw, naked fear. "Go, Sarah, for your own sake, just go." Sarah's training told her to obey, but something deeper, some instinct that had nothing to do with hospital hierarchy, kept her rooted to the spot. "Not until someone tells me what's happening. That woman pointed at me. Why? What does this have to do with me?" Dr. Hayes and Janet exchanged a long look. Then Janet pulled out another piece of paper from her coat pocket, a photograph, old and faded. She held it out to Sarah with trembling hands. Sarah took it from her hands shaking. The photograph showed a young woman, maybe 19, lying in a hospital bed holding a newborn baby. The woman had dark hair and frightened eyes. The baby was wrapped in a pink hospital blanket. Sarah looked up, confused. "Who is this?" Janet wrote on a fresh page of her notepad and held it up. "Your mother, Jessica Lawson, March 15th, 1994. The world tilted. Sarah stared at the words, then at the photograph, then at Janet's fierce, tear-stained face. "That's not possible. My mother was Lisa Mitchell. She died 3 years ago. I was adopted, but not from... This isn't..." Dr. Hayes' voice was barely audible. "Sarah, we need to go somewhere private, right now. All of us." Sarah's legs felt weak. Other nurses were starting to notice the commotion. Marcus was approaching with concern on his face. The morning medication rounds were beginning. Patients were calling for help, and Sarah's entire world was fracturing around her. "The records room. Basement. 10 minutes. Both of you." She looked at Sarah with profound sorrow. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry." Then she walked away, disappearing down the stairwell, leaving Sarah standing in the hallway, holding a photograph of a woman she'd never seen before. A woman who was supposedly her mother. Sarah looked at the photograph again, studying the baby in the young woman's arms, and that's when she saw it. The hospital bracelet on the infant's tiny wrist. She could just make out the printed text. "Baby girl Lawson, 031594. Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking hands and looked at her own birth certificate, which she kept as a photo for identification purposes. Birth date? March 15th, 1994. The same date. Her adoption papers had always said she was born in Seattle, placed through an agency when her birth mother couldn't care for her. But this photograph had been taken at Mercy General Hospital. The same hospital where Sarah had worked for 5 years, walking the same halls where she had apparently been born. Someone had lied. Someone had erased her true identity. And now, 30 years later, the truth was demanding to be heard. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The basement of Mercy General Hospital smelled like old paper and industrial mold. Sarah descended the concrete stairs 10 minutes after Dr. Hayes had left her standing in the hallway, Janet following close behind. Her mind spun with questions, possibilities, impossible implications. The records room was exactly as Sarah had seen it once before, years ago when retrieving archived patient files for a legal case. Row after row of metal filing cabinets stretched into the dim space, organized by decade. A single metal table with 2 chairs sat near the entrance, and a bare bulb cast weak light over the concrete floor. Dr. Hayes was already there, pacing. She had spread documents across the metal table. Old files, yellowed papers, photographs. When Sarah and Janet entered, the administrator stopped pacing and gestured to the chairs. "Sit," Dr. Hayes said. "Both of you, because this is going to take a while, and Sarah, you're going to want to be sitting down for this." Sarah sat. Janet took the other chair, pulling it closer to Sarah as though offering silent support. Sarah still held the photograph, unable to let it go, unable to stop staring at the young woman's face. "Is that really my mother?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Hayes nodded slowly. Yes, her name was Jessica Marie Lawson, or that's what she called herself when she arrived here on March 15, 1994. But we have reason to believe that was a false identity too. Janet pulled out her notepad and wrote, her real name was Jessica Brennan. "Who was she?" Sarah demanded. "And why did you tell me my adoption was from Seattle? Why did you lie?" "Because 30 years ago I made a choice that saved your life, and that choice required lies, lots of them. Forgery, fraud, falsified records, all of it illegal, all of it necessary. And if Janet hadn't walked into this hospital this morning, you would have died never knowing the truth." Sarah's nursing training kicked in, helping her process information in a systematic way. "Start from the beginning. Tell me everything." Dr. Hayes pulled out a thick accordion folder and opened it. Jessica Lawson came to Mercy General on March 15, 1994, in active labor. No prenatal care, no insurance, no identification. She was terrified, alone, and she delivered you at 3:17 a.m., a healthy baby girl. Sarah tried to imagine it, being born in this building, in some delivery room upstairs, brought into the world in the same place where she now worked saving other people's lives. Jessica was only 19, Dr. Hayes continued. She wouldn't tell us anything about herself, wouldn't name the father, wouldn't give us emergency contacts, nothing. But she was recovering well, and you were perfect. We were preparing to discharge you both on March 18th. And then Dr. Hayes' voice broke. And then Jessica started hemorrhaging. We rushed her to surgery, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. She died on March 20th at 4:43 a.m. Sarah felt tears burn her eyes. Her mother, her birth mother, had lived only 5 days after giving birth to her. 5 days of knowing her daughter existed before dying and leaving her alone. "What happened to me after she died?" Sarah asked. Janet wrote quickly, "That's where it gets complicated." Dr. Hayes pulled out another document, an incident report dated March 16, 1994. The day after your birth, there was an incident in the maternity ward. Your hospital bracelet was found removed, discarded in a staff bathroom. At the time, we thought it was simple confusion. Maybe a new parent accidentally took off the wrong bracelet. But Janet, she nodded to the older woman, but Janet was the nurse on duty that night, and she knew it was something more. Janet wrote, "I saw someone in the nursery, a man. He was looking at the babies, checking bracelets. When I asked him who he was, he left quickly. I filed a report. We increased security, but then Jessica died, and everything changed. The hospital contacted social services to take custody of you until foster placement could be arranged. But before they arrived, a man showed up with legal documents claiming to be Jessica's uncle, saying he had the right to custody.
Sarah's blood ran cold. Who was he? We don't know his real name, Dr. Hayes replied, but we believe he was Marcus Hendricks, a dangerous man Jessica had been running from. Janet heard Jessica's final words before she died. Jessica told her that this man would come for the baby, that he was violent, that he couldn't be allowed to take you. Janet nodded, tears streaming down her weathered face. She wrote, Jessica made me promise to protect you. She said he would kill you if he found out you weren't his child. So what did you do? Sarah asked, looking at Dr. Hayes. The administrator met her gaze steadily. I switched you. There was another baby in the nursery that night, a boy, born 3 hours before you, already signed over for adoption. When Marcus Hendricks came with his fraudulent documents, I gave him the wrong baby. He knew immediately it wasn't you. Jessica had told everyone she had had a daughter. He left the boy in the parking lot and disappeared. We recovered the infant safely and returned him to the adoption process. Sarah tried to process this. You gave him a different baby to protect me? I gave him a baby that he immediately abandoned when he realized the deception, Dr. Hayes corrected. The infant was never in real danger. Hendricks wanted Jessica's biological child, not just any baby, but you, Sarah. You were the target, so I had to make you disappear. How? Sarah's mind was reeling. I switched your bracelet with another infant's, a baby girl who was being transferred to an adoption agency in Seattle the next day. I falsified the records, changed your birth date from March 15th to March 16th, erased Jessica Lawson's name from your file entirely, and I sent you to Seattle with that agency, where you were placed with Tom and Lisa Mitchell. Sarah felt sick. Did my parents know? Did Tom and Lisa know about this? Dr. Hayes shook her head. No. As far as they knew, they were adopting a baby through legitimate channels. The agency believed you were the infant they were supposed to receive. I had made the paperwork perfect. Your parents loved you, Sarah. They gave you a good life. They never suspected the truth. Sarah stood abruptly, needing to move. She paced the small space between filing cabinets, her mind trying to reconcile everything she had believed about herself with this new impossible reality. So I'm not Sarah Mitchell. I'm what? Baby girl Lawson? Jessica Brennan's daughter? You are both, Janet wrote. You're Sarah, but you're also hers. Why now? Sarah turned on Janet. Why come forward now after 30 years? Why not let me keep living in ignorance? Janet wrote slowly, her hand shaking. Because I'm dying, pancreatic cancer, 2 months left. I kept a secret for 30 years out of fear, but I can't die without telling you the truth. You deserve to know who your mother was, what she sacrificed for you. Sarah felt something crack open inside her chest. Anger, grief, gratitude, all tangled together. Tell me about her. Tell me about Jessica. Dr. Hayes pulled out more photographs from the folder. This is everything I could find about her. Janet knew her better than anyone during those few days she was here. Janet began writing, filling page after page of her notepad with stories. Jessica was kind despite her fear. She had thanked every nurse by name, had apologized for causing trouble, had held her newborn daughter with such fierce love that everyone who saw it was moved. She had known she was in danger, but had refused to name her attacker, had protected others even while dying. She left you something, Dr. Hayes said quietly. She placed an envelope on the table. The same envelope Sarah had delivered that morning, now opened. This is what Janet brought me today. It's a letter Jessica wrote to you, meant to be given to you when you turned 18, but I kept it sealed, hoping you'd never need to know the truth. Sarah picked up the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were 3 sheets of paper covered in her mother's handwriting. Small, careful, beautiful. The first page began, "To my daughter. If you're reading this, it means I didn't survive to raise you. I'm so sorry."
Sarah read through tears, learning about her mother's life, her love story with a man named Daniel Park, her terror of Marcus Hendricks, her desperate hope that her daughter would somehow be safe. And then, on the 3rd page, the revelation that made Sarah's breath catch. I've hidden evidence of Marcus's crimes, a ledger documenting everything he and his associates have done. It's my insurance, proof that if he ever finds you, you can destroy him. I've hidden it where only someone who loves you would think to look, where stories live, We would have read together if I'd been given the chance to be your mother." Sarah looked up at Dr. Hayes. She hid evidence? A ledger of crimes? "That's what the letter says," Dr. Hayes confirmed. "But I've never found it. I've looked, believe me. For 30 years, I've wondered if it really existed or if Jessica was just hoping she could protect you from beyond the grave." Janet wrote urgently, "It exists. I helped her hide it. The night before she died, she gave me instructions, told me where to put it." "Where?" Sarah demanded. Janet wrote, "The hospital library, 3rd floor, inside a medical text about obstetrics." She thought it was fitting, hiding evidence of violence inside a book about bringing life into the world. Sarah's mind raced. The old medical library on the 3rd floor was rarely used now, most of its collection boxed up and archived. But if the ledger had been there for 30 years, it might still be there, waiting to be discovered. "We need to find it," Sarah said. "If this Marcus Hendricks is still out there, still looking for me—" "He's dead," Dr. Hayes interrupted. "He died 6 months ago. Heart attack. I've been monitoring him for years, making sure he never found you. When he died, I thought the threat was finally over. I thought you were finally safe." But Janet was shaking her head frantically. She wrote, "He has a son, Marcus Jr. He's been continuing his father's search. He called me 2 weeks ago. He knows you exist. He knows you're here." "Here? At this hospital?" Janet nodded and wrote, "He's been working here, watching you, waiting." "Who?" Dr. Hayes said sharply. "Who is Marcus Hendricks Jr.?" But before Janet could answer the answer, Sarah's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, seeing a text from an unknown number. "I know who you really are, baby girl Lawson. Your mother took something from me. Meet me in the hospital library in 1 hour, or I'll tell the world what Dr. Hayes did to save you. Come alone." Sarah showed the text to Dr. Hayes and Janet. The administrator's face went white. "This is a trap." "Maybe," Sarah said. "But it's also a chance to end this, to find the evidence and finally put an end to 30 years of running and hiding." Janet grabbed Sarah's arm, writing desperately, "Too dangerous. He's violent like his father." "I'm a nurse," Sarah said quietly. "I've handled violent patients. I've de-escalated crises. And I'm not going to let some man who thinks he owns me dictate how this ends." She looked at Dr. Hayes. "You've protected me for 30 years. Let me protect myself now." As Sarah stood to leave for the library, Janet grabbed her wrist one more time and pressed something into her palm, a small key. Sarah looked down at it confused, and Janet wrote, "Security Deposit Box, Bank of America, Downtown Branch, Box 1547. Everything Jessica wanted you to have is there. If something happens to me, get it." And that's when Sarah understood. Janet had been preparing for this moment, had kept evidence and treasures safe for 3 decades, waiting for the day she could pass them to Jessica's daughter. But the key also meant Janet believed something terrible might happen in that library. The old woman was saying goodbye. Sarah climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor with Dr. Hayes and Janet following, despite her protest. She had argued that she should go alone, as the text demanded, but neither woman would hear of it. "I've protected you for 30 years, Dr. Hayes said firmly. I'm not stopping now." Janet wrote, "I've waited 30 years to finish this. I'm coming." The old medical library was located in a forgotten wing of the hospital, accessible through corridors that had once been bustling research spaces, but now sat mostly empty. Sarah's heart hammered as they approached the heavy oak doors. She pushed them open, and they stepped into a room that smelled of old paper and neglect. Shelves lined the walls, floor to ceiling, filled with medical texts dating back decades. At the far end, a door marked Archives, authorized personnel only, led to the storage room where the oldest texts were kept. The library appeared empty. Sarah checked her phone. 11:47 a.m., 13 minutes early. "We should search for the ledger while we wait," Dr. Hayes whispered, "if we can find it before he arrives." But Janet grabbed both their arms, pulling them behind a shelf. She pointed toward the archive room door, which was slightly ajar. Through the gap, Sarah could see movement, Someone was already here, already searching. They waited in tense silence. Then the archive room door swung fully open, and a figure emerged carrying a thick medical textbook. The person's back was to them, but as they turned, Sarah's blood froze. It was Marcus Chen, the nursing assistant who had worked on her floor for the past 2 years. The friendly guy who always helped with heavy patients, who brought donuts on Fridays, who had seemed like such a reliable colleague. He saw them immediately, and his expression shifted from concentration to cold satisfaction. "Hello, Sarah, or should I call you baby girl Lawson?" Sarah stepped forward, positioning herself between Marcus and the 2 older women. "Marcus, you're Marcus Hendricks, Jr.?" Surprised, he set the textbook down on a reading table, and Sarah saw he had already found what they were looking for. The hollowed-out center of the book contained a small leather-bound ledger. "I've been waiting 2 years for this moment, working beside you, watching you, waiting for the truth to come out." "Why?" Sarah demanded. "What do you want?" "What my father wanted, what he spent 30 years searching for, justice." Marcus's eyes were cold, so unlike the warm colleague he thought he'd known. "My father loved a woman named Jessica. She was his, but she betrayed him, got pregnant with another man's child, stole his property, and ran." "She was running from an abuser," Dr. Hayes said sharply, stepping forward. "Your father was violent. Jessica was terrified of him." "My father was protecting what was his," Marcus's voice rose. "And you," he pointed at Dr. Hayes, "you helped her steal from him. You switched the babies, falsified records, made his daughter disappear. You're the reason he spent 30 years searching, the reason he died with his obsession unfulfilled." Janet pulled out her notepad and wrote quickly, holding it up. "Jessica was not his. Baby was not his. He had no right." "He had every right." Marcus grabbed the ledger, holding it up. "And now I have the proof. Everything in here, every crime, every name, every detail my father documented, this can destroy dozens of people, powerful people, people who will pay anything to make sure this never sees the light of day." I understood suddenly. "You're not here for revenge. You're here for money. You want to blackmail the people named in that ledger." Marcus smiled. "I'm here for both. My father died broken, obsessed with finding his daughter and his property. I'm going to finish what he started. I'm going to get rich off this ledger, and I'm going to make sure everyone who helped Jessica pay for what they did." By threatening to expose Dr. Hayes' fraud, by using me as leverage. Exactly. Dr. Hayes committed multiple felonies to save you. If I expose that, her career is over, she goes to prison, and her reputation is destroyed. But if she pays me, if you all pay me, I'll keep quiet. I'll disappear with this ledger, and you'll never hear from me again. "We're not paying you anything," Dr. Hayes said. Marcus pulled out a gun, small, black, terrifying in the quiet library. Sarah's nursing training kicked in immediately, assessing the threat, calculating distances, looking for options. "Then my father, I'm taking a ledger anyway, your choice, but either way, I'm walking out of here with what my father couldn't get." Janet moved before Sarah could stop her. The elderly woman rushed at Marcus with surprising speed, her frail body throwing itself between the gun and Sarah. Marcus stumbled backwards, startled, and the gun fired. The sound was deafening. Janet's body jerked and she fell. Sarah dove forward, catching her, and both of them crashing to the floor. Blood bloomed across Janet's gray coat, spreading rapidly from her chest. "No!" Sarah screamed, her hands immediately applying pressure to the wound, her training taking over even as her heart shattered. "Janet, stay with me! Stay with me!" Dr. Hayes lunged at Marcus, grabbing for the gun. They struggled, years of administrative authority translating into desperate physical courage. The gun fired again, the bullet striking a bookshelf, sending splinters of wood flying. Sarah kept pressure on Janet's wound, her other hand grabbing her phone to call 911. But Janet's hand found hers, gripping weakly. Her lips moved, forming words Sarah had to lean close to hear. "Tell," she whispered, blood on her lips, "tell Daniel, his daughter, is brave, like Jessica." "Don't talk," Sarah begged. "Help is coming. Just hold on." But Janet's eyes were dimming. She looked at Sarah one last time with those fierce, burning eyes that had carried 30 years of guilt and silence. And then she was gone, her hand going slack. A third gunshot. Sarah looked up to see Dr. Hayes standing over Marcus, who'd fallen against a bookshelf clutching his shoulder. The administrator had somehow turned the gun against him during their struggle. "Sarah," Dr. Hayes said, in her voice shaking, "Sarah, call 911 now." Sarah knelt on the floor, Janet's body cooling in her arms, blood on her scrubs, her entire world shattered and reformed in the space of minutes. She had come to work that morning as Sarah Mitchell, nurse, living a life she thought she understood. Now she knelt in the library as Sarah Lawson, Jessica Brennan's daughter, holding a woman who had just sacrificed herself for the second time in 30 years. She pulled out her phone and called 911, her voice steady despite the chaos, years of nursing training making her calm in crisis even as her heart broke. Police came, paramedics came. They pronounced Janet Cruz dead at the scene and took Marcus Hendricks Jr. away in handcuffs. Dr. Hayes was escorted away to give statements, and Sarah was left sitting in a library, blood on her hands, her mind replaying the moment Janet had thrown herself into the path of a bullet. A nurse, one of Sarah's colleagues from the medical surgical floor, approached cautiously. "Sarah, are you okay? Do you need medical attention?" Sarah looked down at herself. Janet's blood covered her scrubs. Her hands were shaking, but physically she was unharmed. "I'm fine," she said automatically, the response every nurse gave even when falling apart inside. She wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. Janet Cruz had died protecting her, just as Jessica Lawson had died trying to save her 30 years ago. Two women, separated by decades, united by a desperate need to keep Sarah safe from the violence she never knew existed. A detective approached asking questions. Sarah answered mechanically. Yes, Marcus had threatened them. Yes, he had fired first. Yes, that Janet had tried to intervene. No, Sarah had never suspected Marcus was anyone other than who he claimed to be. The ledger sat on the evidence table, sealed in a plastic bag. Sarah stared at it, that small leather notebook that had caused 30 years of suffering that contained proof of crime spanning decades. Her mother had stolen it, hidden it, and died protecting it, and now it would finally serve its purpose. But the cost. God, the cost. As the police processed the scene, Sarah noticed something fall from Janet's coat pocket, a small photograph, bent and worn from decades of handling. Sarah picked it up and her breath caught. It showed three people, a young Jessica Lawson holding baby Sarah in the hospital, Janet standing beside the bed in her nursing uniform, and a man Sarah didn't recognize standing near the window. On the back, written in Janet's handwriting, March 16, 1994, the day I promised to protect her, the day Daniel came to say goodbye. Daniel Park, her biological father, and he'd been there, in that hospital room, 30 years ago. Janet had known him, had kept this photograph all these years, which meant Janet knew exactly where Daniel Park was now, and Sarah was about to discover her father had been closer than she ever imagined.
3 hours later, Sarah sat in an FBI interview room with two agents and Dr. Marion Hayes. The hospital had given her fresh scrubs to change into, but she could still feel Janet's blood on her skin, an invisible weight she couldn't wash away. The agents asked detailed questions about Marcus Hendricks Jr., about his employment at the hospital, about his threats. They asked about the ledger, and Sarah told them everything her mother's letter had revealed. Dr. Hayes corroborated the story, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was admitting. 30 years of fraud, falsified records, illegal adoption facilitation. Dr. Hayes, one agent said carefully, "You understand you'll likely face charges for what you did in 1994. "I understand," Dr. Hayes replied, "and I'd do it again. That baby would have died if I hadn't intervened. Sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing." The agents exchanged glances but didn't argue. Instead, they turned to the ledger, which now represented the biggest corruption case their office had seen in years. Marcus Hendricks Sr. had documented everything: assaults, bribes, drug trafficking, names of police officers and city officials who had taken payments. It was a treasure trove of evidence that would trigger dozens of investigations. When the agents finally released them, it was nearly 6 p.m. Sarah and Dr. Hayes walked out of the FBI building into the evening air, both exhausted, both carrying trauma they would spend years processing. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "For me, probably an arraignment, charges, maybe prison time." Dr. Hayes looked at her. "For you, that's up to you, Sarah. You can go back to your life, try to forget all of this, or you can search for answers about who you really are." Sarah thought about the photograph in her pocket, the one showing Daniel Park in the hospital room. Janet wrote something before she died. She said to tell Daniel that his daughter is brave like Jessica. "Do you know who Daniel Park is?" Dr. Hayes' expression grew complicated. "Yes, he's your biological father, the man that Jessica loved. And Sarah," she hesitated, "he's been looking for you for 30 years. Sarah's heart stuttered. "He knows I exist? He knows. After Jessica died, he came to the hospital demanding information about what happened to the baby. I told him the truth, about the switch, about sending you to Seattle, everything. He begged me to tell him exactly where you were, but I refused. I said if he truly loved Jessica and truly loved you, he would let you grow up in peace. But you told him I was in Seattle, Sarah said, understanding dawning. I told him the general area, nothing more specific, and he moved there, Sarah. He bought a house in the same neighborhood where your adoptive parents lived. He's been watching over you from a distance for nearly 30 years. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her father, her biological father, had been there, not raising her, not claiming her, but present, watching, protecting from afar. Where is he now? Sarah asked. I don't know. He moved away after your adoptive parents died 3 years ago. I think he was respecting your grief, giving you space, but Janet knew where he was. She kept in touch with him over the years. Sarah pulled out her photograph. He was there the day after I was born. He came to see me. Dr. Hayes nodded. Jessica had called him before she went into labor, told him she was at Mercy General. He arrived the morning after your birth, got to hold you once for maybe 5 minutes before I made him leave. Told him it wasn't safe, that Marcus Hendricks might be watching. Daniel kissed your forehead and said goodbye, thinking he'd never see you again. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. I need to find him. I can help you with that, said a voice behind them. Sarah and Dr. Hayes turned to find a woman standing near the FBI building entrance. She was in her late 40s with dark hair and eyes that looked startlingly like Sarah's own. She wore jeans and a leather jacket, and she moved towards them with purposeful strides. Who are you? Dr. Hayes demanded. My name is Rachel Brennan. I'm Jessica's younger sister. The woman looked at Sarah with an expression of wonder and grief. I'm your aunt. Sarah couldn't speak. Another revelation, another impossible piece of a puzzle she hadn't known existed. Jessica had a sister, Dr. Hayes said. There was nothing in her records because we were separated when our parents died, Rachel explained. We both went into foster care, but to different families, lost track of each other for years. By the time I found Jessica again, she was with Marcus Hendricks. She told me she was pregnant, told me she was running. That was the last time I heard her voice. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I spent 30 years searching for her daughter, for you. How did you find me? Sarah asked. Janet Cruz. 2 months ago, after she was diagnosed with cancer, she tracked me down, told me everything, told me it was time for you to know the truth and that you'd need family when the truth came out. Rachel pulled out her phone, showing Sarah a text message. She texted me this morning, said today was the day, and asked me to come to the hospital to be here when you needed me. Sarah looked at the timestamp on the text, 6:47 a.m., sent just minutes before Janet had arrived at the hospital with her envelope. The older woman had planned everything, had orchestrated this entire revelation knowing she might not survive to see it through. She knew Marcus Jr. would be there, Sarah said. She knew he might kill her, but she came anyway. Rachel nodded. Janet carried guilt for 30 years. She felt like she'd failed Jessica by keeping silent. This was her chance to make it right, whatever the cost. Sarah thought about Janet's final words. Tell Daniel that his daughter is brave like Jessica. Do you know where my father is? Where Daniel Park is? Rachel's expression softened. I do, and Sarah, there's something else you need to know about Daniel before you meet him. What? He didn't just watch you from a distance. He became part of your life in small ways. He volunteered at your schools, donated to causes you cared about, showed up at community events you attended. He found ways to be present without disrupting the life your adopted parents gave you. Dr. Hayes frowned. How do you know all of this? Because I've known Daniel for 15 years. Once I found him, once Janet connected us, we became allies. Both of us loving the same person from a distance, both of us protecting her without her knowing it. Your father is a good man, Sarah. He spent 30 decades loving you, honoring Jessica's memory, and respecting the boundaries that kept you safe. He's been waiting for this day, too. Sarah tried to process it all, a father who loved her from the shadows, an aunt who searched for her across decades, a mother who sacrificed everything. Her identity, which had seemed so clear that morning, was now a mosaic of truths and lies, biology and choice, the past and the present. I want to meet him. Daniel, my father. Where is he? Rachel smiled through tears. He's in Seattle, same house he's owned for 28 years, 2 blocks from where you grew up. He's been waiting there, hoping that someday you'd come looking for him. But before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with a call from the hospital. It was her supervisor, voice urgent. Sarah, you need to come back now. There's been a development with the Marcus Hendricks case. They found something in his locker.
A file on you, details about your daily routine, photos of you going to work, coming home. But there's more. He wasn't working alone. There's evidence of a partner, someone else in the hospital who's been helping him. Someone who knew you were Jessica's daughter before Janet ever arrived. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized the danger wasn't over. Marcus Jr. had been caught, but his accomplice was still out there, still watching, still waiting.
Sarah raced back to Mercy General, with Dr. Hayes and Rachel following in a separate car. Her mind spun with possibilities. Who at the hospital had known? Who had been helping Marcus Jr. watch her for 2 years? She thought through her colleagues, the nurses she worked with daily, the doctors she assisted, the support staff who kept the floor running. When she arrived, hospital security escorted her to the administrative offices, where FBI agents were now stationed. They had Marcus Jr.'s locker contents spread across a conference table. Photographs of Sarah at work, at home, at the grocery store, schedules of her shifts, notes about her routines. It was a stalker's catalog, meticulously documented. But the most disturbing item was a series of email printouts, correspondence between Marcus Jr. and someone else discussing Sarah's movements, her relationships, her vulnerabilities. The emails were signed only with initials, M.H. M.H., Sarah said aloud. Who at this hospital has those initials? Dr. Hayes had gone pale. No, it can't be. What? Sarah demanded. Who? Michael Harrison. He's been the night shift supervisor in the medical surgical wing for 3 years. Started around the same time Marcus did. Sarah remembered Michael, mid-40s, efficient, professional, always helpful. He had recommended Marcus for the nursing assistant position, had praised his work ethic, had often scheduled them for overlapping shifts. Where is he now? An FBI agent asked sharply. Dr. Hayes checked her phone, accessing the hospital's staff scheduling system. He's on duty. Started his shift at 7 p.m. He's on your floor right now, Sarah. The agents moved immediately, radios crackling with instructions to security. But Sarah's nursing instinct kicked in. If Michael Harrison was on the floor and knew they were coming for him, her patients were in danger. I need to get up there, Sarah said. If he's panicking, if he knows he's caught. Absolutely not, an agent said firmly. You're a civilian and potentially a target. We'll handle this. But Sarah was already moving toward the door. Years of nursing had taught her that when patients were in danger, protocol mattered less than action. Dr. Hayes tried to grab her arm, but Sarah pulled away. My patients are up there, people I'm responsible for. I'm not letting them get caught in this. She ran for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, her legs burning from the exertion. Behind her, she heard Dr. Hayes shouting for security, heard agents calling for backup, but Sarah's focus had narrowed to a single point. Get to the floor, protect her patients, end this. She burst through the stairwell door onto the medical surgical floor and immediately saw chaos. Nurses were clustered around the medication room, voices raised in alarm. Sarah pushed through to find Michael Harrison inside, holding a syringe filled with clear liquid. Stay back, he shouted. I'll inject this. I swear I'll do it. Sarah's training took over. Her voice dropped into the calm, authoritative tone she used for agitated patients. Michael, put down the syringe. Whatever that is, whatever you're planning, it's not worth it. You don't understand, Michael said, his hand shaking. Marcus's father promised me money, said when he got the ledger, when he got revenge on the people who helped Jessica, he'd pay me enough to retire. I've been waiting years, and now it's all gone. He's dead, Marcus Jr. is arrested, and I'm going to prison for nothing. You helped them track me, Sarah said, keeping her voice steady. You gave Marcus information about my schedule, my routines. Why? Because you were the key. Marcus Hendricks Sr. was obsessed with finding Jessica's daughter. He knew if he found you, you'd eventually lead him to the evidence. So he sent his son here, had him get a job. But Marcus Jr. needed help, needed someone on the inside who could watch you more closely. That's where I came in. Sarah took a careful step forward. What's in the syringe, Michael? Potassium chloride. Enough to kill me within seconds. His hand steadied, finger on the plunger. I'm not going to prison. I'm ending this my way. No, you're not. Sarah's voice was firm. Because that's the coward's way out.
My mother didn't get to choose. She died trying to protect me. Janet Cruz didn't get to choose. She died throwing herself in front of a bullet. You don't get to escape consequences while they're dead." "I didn't kill anyone," Michael protested. "You stalked me. You put me in danger. You were complicit in a conspiracy that got Janet killed. And you know what? You're going to face that. You're going to stand trial, and you're going to answer for what you did, because that's what justice looks like. Not running, not hiding, but facing the truth." Michael's hand wavered. Sarah saw the moment of doubt, the hesitation. She lunged forward, grabbing his wrist, forcing it upward. The syringe flew from his hand, hitting the floor and rolling under a cabinet. Security burst through the door seconds later, tackling Michael to the ground. Sarah stepped back, her heart hammering, her hands shaking with adrenaline. Other nurses surrounded her, asking if she was okay, praising her courage. But Sarah barely heard them. She was thinking about her mother, about Janet, about the chain of violence and sacrifice that had led to this moment. Dr. Hayes appeared in the doorway, her face a mixture of terror and relief. "Sarah, thank God." "It's over," Sarah said. Michael was the last one. "It's finally over." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't really over, because now she had to decide what to do with the truth she'd learned. She had to decide whether to search for Daniel Park, whether to build a relationship with Rachel Brennan, whether to investigate her mother's past or let it remain buried. She had to decide who Sarah Mitchell was now that she knew she was also Sarah Lawson, also Jessica Brennan's daughter, also Daniel Park's child. As Sarah left the hospital that night, emotionally and physically exhausted, she found an envelope taped to her car windshield. Inside was a plane ticket to Seattle, dated for the next morning, and a note in handwriting she didn't recognize. "Your father has waited 30 years to meet you. He'll be at Pike Place Market tomorrow at noon, standing where he and his mother had their first date. He'll be holding a single white rose, Jessica's favorite flower. The choice to meet him is yours, but he hopes you'll come. He has stories to tell you, memories to share, and a lifetime of love to give. Rachel." Sarah looked at the ticket, then at a reflection in the car window. She could go back to her apartment, back to her life, back to being Sarah Mitchell who had everything figured out. Or she could get on that plane and discover what it meant to be Jessica's daughter, Daniel's child, part of a story that had been waiting 30 years to be completed.
Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat in her apartment surrounded by the artifacts of her life as Sarah Mitchell. Photos with her adoptive parents, nursing school diplomas, birthday cards from friends who knew her as the person she'd believed herself to be. Each object felt both authentic and false, true and incomplete. At 5 a.m. she made her decision. She packed a small bag, called in for emergency family leave, and drove to the airport. The plane ticket Rachel had left was for a 9 a.m. flight. Sarah boarded with her heart in her throat, carrying only essentials and the photograph of her mother holding her as a newborn. The flight to Seattle took 2 hours. Sarah spent them staring out the window, watching the landscape change below, thinking about the journey her mother had made 30 years ago, pregnant, terrified, running for her life. Jessica had been so young, only 19, facing impossible choices with courage Sarah was only beginning to understand. Pike Place Market was crowded, even on a Wednesday at noon. Tourists jostled between vendors selling flowers and fresh fish. Artists displayed their work. Musicians played for donations. Sarah stood at the entrance, scanning the crowd for a man holding a white rose. She found him near the original Starbucks, standing beside a flower vendor's stall. He was in his early 50s, Asian features, kind eyes, wearing a simple jacket and jeans. In his hand was a single white rose, and his expression as he searched the crowd was a mixture of hope and terror. Sarah walked toward him slowly, her legs unsteady. As she got closer, he saw her. Their eyes met across the crowded market, and Sarah saw recognition bloom on his face, not because he knew what she looked like now, but because she looked like Jessica. She had her mother's eyes, her mother's way of holding herself, her mother's features softened by time and genetics. "Sarah?" he said, his voice breaking on her name. Daniel? She replied. They stood 3 feet apart, separated by 30 years of distance and silence, by lies and truths, by all the moments they should have shared but didn't. Then Daniel held out the rose. Your mother loved these, he said. I used to bring her one every time we met. She said they reminded her that beautiful things could still exist even in ugly situations. Sarah took the rose, her hands trembling. Rachel told me you've been watching over me all these years. I couldn't not watch, Daniel said simply. You were all I had left of Jessica. I promised her I'd keep you safe, and I did the only way I could, from a distance, respecting the life Dr. Hayes had given you, never interfering. But Sarah, not a day has passed that I haven't thought about you, haven't wondered what you were doing, haven't wished I could be part of your life. You could have told me, Sarah said. After my parents died, you could have come forward. And said what? Hello, I'm your biological father who gave you up 30 years ago. Let's be family now. You were grieving. You had your own life. I didn't want to disrupt that with my needs, my desires. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. But I hoped. Every day I hoped that someday you might want to know the truth, might want to find me. Sarah felt something crack open inside her chest, all the anger and confusion and grief she'd been holding since Janet arrived with that envelope. Tell me about her. Tell me about my mother. Who was Jessica really? Daniel smiled through tears. She was the bravest person I ever knew. She walked into my community center class. I was teaching ESL to immigrants and foster kids, and she had this quiet determination about her, like she was fighting invisible battles every day but refused to quit. We became friends first. She was so careful about trust, so afraid of letting anyone close. But slowly she opened up. They walked through the market as Daniel talked, finding a quiet bench overlooking Elliott Bay. He told Sarah about Jessica's love of books, how she would lose herself in libraries for hours. About her fierce independence, how she refused to be defined by the abuse she'd survived. About the day she discovered she was pregnant and her terror that Marcus would find out. She knew the baby wasn't his. We'd been together for 6 months by then, secretly, carefully. Marcus thought she was faithful to him. When she realized she was pregnant, she knew she had to run. I begged her to let me come with her, to let me protect her. But she refused. Said Marcus knew about me, would hunt us both if we ran together. So she went alone, and I respected her choice even though it killed me. She died 5 days after I was born, Sarah said quietly. Daniel nodded, pain crossing his face. I got the call from Dr. Hayes, rushed to the hospital, but by then you'd been switched with another baby, sent to the adoption agency. Dr. Hayes told me you were safe, that I couldn't find you without putting you in danger. She made me promise to stay away, to let you grow up in peace. It was the hardest promise I ever kept. Sarah pulled out the photograph, the one showing Daniel in the hospital room. Janet kept this for 30 years. You were there the day after I was born. I was. Dr. Hayes let me in for 5 minutes. Told me it was the only time I'd ever see you, that I needed to say goodbye. I held you, memorized your face, and left. Thought I'd spend the rest of my life wondering who you became. But Daniel looked at Sarah. But I was wrong. Dr. Hayes told me the general area where you had been placed. So I moved to Seattle, bought a house in your neighborhood, and I watched you grow up. From a distance, always from a distance, but I was there. My adoptive parents, did they know? Eventually, when you were about 10, your father Tom noticed me at too many school events, confronted me, threatened to call police. So I told him everything, showed him proof, letters from Jessica, photos, documentation of Marcus Hendricks's violence. Tom was angry at first, felt I was stalking his daughter, but Lissa, Daniel smiled sadly. Lissa understood. She said any father who loved his daughter enough to watch over her for a decade without claiming her deserved to be part of her life in some small way. Sarah remembered her mother, Lissa Mitchell, the woman who had raised her. Lissa had been kind, perceptive, always encouraging Sarah to be curious about the world. Had Lissa known the truth all those years?
Had she and Tom protected Sarah not just as adoptive parents, but as co-conspirators in a deception designed to save her life? They were good people. They loved you completely. I was grateful to them every day for giving you the life Jessica and I couldn't give you. Sarah looked out at the water, at the ferryboats cutting through Elliott Bay, at the seagulls wheeling overhead. I don't know how to process all this. I don't know to be Sarah Mitchell and baby girl Lawson and Jessica Brennan's daughter at the same time. You don't have to choose, Daniel said gently. You're all of those things. Your identity isn't either or, it's and also. You're Sarah Mitchell, nurse, daughter of Tom and Lisa, who loved you and raised you, and you're also Jessica's daughter, conceived in love, born in crisis, saved by people who broke laws to protect you. Both truths exist, both are real.
Sarah turned to look at him. What do you want from me? Now that we're here, now that we know each other, what are you hoping for? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. I'm hoping we can build something new. Not trying to make up for lost time. We can't get those 30 years back. But maybe we can create a relationship based on choice rather than biology. On who we are now rather than who we might have been. I'm not trying to replace your father. Tom was your dad. I'm just Daniel, someone who loved your mother, who has loved you from afar, and who would be honored to be part of your life in whatever capacity you're comfortable with. Sarah felt tears stream down her face. I want that. I want to know you. I want to hear stories about my mother. I want to understand where I come from. She paused. But I also need time. This has been the most overwhelming week of my life. I need space to process, to grieve, to figure out who I am now. Take all the time you need, Daniel said. I've waited 30 years. I can wait longer. But Sarah, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. Before you go, I want you to have this. It belonged to Jessica. She gave it to me the last time I saw her, asked me to give it to our daughter when I found her. Sarah opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a tree, roots spreading below, branches reaching above. Jessica said it represented what she hoped for you, that you'd know your roots, but still be free to grow in whatever direction you chose, that you'd be grounded in truth, but reaching toward your own light. Sarah clasped the necklace around her neck and felt it settle against her skin like a blessing. She thought about her mother, 19 years old and terrified, choosing this necklace as a final gift to the daughter she'd never see grow up. She thought about Janet Cruz, carrying guilt for 30 years before finally finding the courage to tell the truth. She thought about Dr. Marion Hayes, breaking laws to save a life. She thought about Daniel, loving from the shadows for 30 decades. All of them had made impossible choices. All of them had sacrificed something precious. And all of it had been to give Sarah this moment, this choice, this freedom, this chance to decide who she wanted to be. Thank you, Sarah said to Daniel, for respecting my life, for loving my mother, for being here now. I don't know what our relationship will look like going forward, but I'm glad we're starting it. They exchanged phone numbers and email addresses. Daniel told her he'd be available whenever she wanted to talk, to meet, to learn more. Rachel had given her a box of Jessica's belongings, letters, photos, the journal Jessica had kept during her pregnancy. Sarah would spend months going through it all, piecing together her mother's short life, understanding the woman who had given her everything. Before they parted, Daniel hugged her, carefully asking permission first, respecting her boundaries. And in that embrace, Sarah felt something she hadn't known she'd been missing, a connection to her history, to her origins, to the complicated tapestry of love and sacrifice that had made her existence possible. She flew back to Mercy General that evening, returned to her apartment, to her life, to her job. But everything had changed. She looked at her nursing scrubs with new understanding. She had become a healer because of her mother's tragedy, because she'd been saved by people willing to break rules. She walked through the hospital seeing not just patients, but stories, not just colleagues, but complex humans carrying their own secrets and sacrifices. A week later, Sarah testified at Dr. Marion Hayes' hearing.
She told the judge exactly what Dr. Hayes had done and why. She explained that without that fraud, she would have died as an infant, that the illegal adoption had saved her life. She asked for mercy, for understanding that sometimes the law and justice diverge. The judge listened carefully. Dr. Hayes was found guilty of the technical violations, but sentenced to probation and community service rather than prison time. The judge noted that while the law had been broken, it had been broken in service of saving a child's life, and that mercy had a place in justice. Sarah also testified before a grand jury about Marcus Hendricks's ledger. The evidence it contained led to 18 arrests of people who thought their crimes were buried with Marcus. Justice, delayed by 30 years, finally arrived. 3 months after Janet Cruz's death, Sarah stood at her grave with Rachel and Daniel. They placed flowers on the headstone, which Sarah personally designed. It read, Janet Cruz, 1953 to 2025. She kept a promise. She saved a life. She died a hero. She carried so much guilt, so many years. I hope she knew at the end that she was forgiven, that she was brave. She knew, Rachel said. The look on her face when she stepped in front of that gun, that was peace. That was a woman who finally found redemption. Sarah touched her necklace her mother had left her, the tree with its roots and branches. She thought about identity, how it wasn't something fixed and simple, but something fluid and complex, built from biology and choice, from the past and the present, from who people told you to be and who you decided to become. She had spent 31 years as Sarah Mitchell, and she would carry that name forward with pride. But she also claimed her place as Jessica Brennan's daughter now, claimed the heritage of a teenage mother who had fought impossible odds. She claimed Daniel Park as her father, building a relationship with him slowly, carefully, letting it grow into something real and chosen rather than merely inherited. She claimed Rachel as her aunt, her connection to a past she'd never known, her link to the woman who had given her life. And she claimed her own story, all of it, the beautiful and the broken, the true and the false, the sacrifices made in her name and the life she would now live with full awareness and purpose. 6 months after that terrible day in the library, Sarah made a change. She left bedside nursing and took a position as a victim's advocate with a nonprofit serving survivors of domestic violence. She used her experience, her unique perspective as someone who had been saved by people willing to break rules, to help others trapped in dangerous situations. She became a voice for people who had no voice, just as her mother had needed a voice 30 years ago. She helped women escape abusers, helped children find safety, helped families rebuild after violence. And in each person she helped, she honored Janet Cruz's sacrifice and Jessica Brennan's courage. On the first anniversary of Janet's death, Sarah returned to Mercy General. She stood in the medical surgical wing where it had all begun, where a woman in a gray coat had waited with an envelope that changed everything. The hospital had installed a small plaque near the nurses' station dedicated to Janet's memory. It didn't mention the full story. Some truths were too complicated for public plaques, but it honored her years of service and her sacrifice. Sarah touched it gently, remembering those fierce eyes, that desperate need to finally tell the truth. Do you have regrets about learning the truth? About everything that's happened? Sarah considered the question carefully. Her life had been torn apart and rebuilt. She had lost her identity and gained a history. She had discovered that almost everything she'd believed about herself was incomplete, but also that she'd been deeply, profoundly loved by people she'd never known existed.
No, Sarah said finally, I don't have regrets. Because the truth, even when it's painful, even when it's complicated, the truth is what allows us to be fully human. My mother understood that. She left me evidence, left me letters, left me a path to discover who I really was. She could have let me stay hidden forever, but she trusted that someday I'd be strong enough to handle the truth. Daniel joined them, having driven from Seattle for the anniversary. Jessica would be so proud of you, the woman you've become, the choices you're making, the way you're using her story to help others. She would be so proud. Sarah leaned into him, this father she was slowly learning to know. I hope so.
I hope she's somehow aware that her sacrifice mattered, that I'm living the life she fought to give me. They left the hospital together, walking through the same corridors Sarah had walked that Tuesday morning a year ago when her world had been simple and small and safe. Now her world was complicated and vast and sometimes frightening, but it was also real. It was true. It was hers. Sarah wore her mother's necklace every day, the tree with roots and branches. She understood now what Jessica had been trying to tell her. You needed to know where you came from, needed to understand your roots so you could grow in whatever direction you chose. The roots didn't define you. They simply gave you the foundation to reach toward whatever light called to you. She was Sarah Mitchell, adopted daughter of Tom and Lisa, who had loved her with their whole hearts. She was baby girl Lawson, born to Jessica in a moment of terror and hope. She was Daniel Park's daughter, connected by biology and now, slowly, by choice. She was Rachel's niece, a link to a past she was still discovering. She was the girl saved by Dr. Marion Hayes' illegal courage. She was the woman Janet Cruz died to protect. She was all of these things and none of these things. She was simply Sarah, survivor of other people's choices, architect of her own future, living proof that sometimes the most profound love is expressed not in grand gestures, but in quiet sacrifices, not in claiming ownership, but in letting go. The automatic doors of the hospital slid open one last time as Sarah left and she walked toward her car with Daniel and Rachel beside her. She touched the tree pendant at her throat and thought about all the ordinary people who had done extraordinary things in quiet moments when no one was watching. People who committed small acts of tremendous courage. People who chose love over fear, even when the cost was everything. She thought about nurses and administrators and aging women carrying guilt like stones until they could finally set them down through sacrifice. She thought about fathers who loved from distance and mothers who died protecting daughters they barely knew. She thought about all the complicated, imperfect people who had loved her imperfectly but completely. And she understood now that this was what it meant to be human, to contain multitudes, to hold contradictions, to be both the product of others' choices and the author of your own story, to be rooted and free, hidden and found, broken and whole, all at once. Sarah drove away from Mercy General Hospital, watching it disappear in her rearview mirror, the building that had held 30 years of secrets, that had been both her birthplace and her workplace, that had witnessed her mother's death and her own rebirth into truth. She was going home now, to an apartment that felt different than it had a year ago, to a life that had expanded beyond recognition, to a future she would build with her own hands. She would call Daniel tonight, maybe make plans to visit Seattle next month. She would meet Rachel for coffee and listen to more stories about Jessica. She would continue her work with domestic violence survivors, honoring the chain of sacrifice that had saved her. And she would wear her mother's necklace, carrying Jessica's final gift against her heart, the reminder that knowing your roots gives you the strength to choose your direction, that you can honor the past without being imprisoned by it, that you can be both who you were told you were and who you discovered yourself to be. Sarah Mitchell, baby girl Lawson, Jessica Brennan's daughter, Daniel Park's child, Janet Cruz's final act of courage. All of it true, all of it real, all of it forming the complex, beautiful, painful tapestry of one woman's identity, a woman who had been lost and found, hidden and revealed, saved and reborn. The automatic doors of the hospital slid open one last time as Sarah left, and she walked toward her car with Daniel and Rachel beside her. She touched the tree pendant at her throat and thought about all the ordinary people who had done extraordinary things in quiet moments when no one was watching. People who committed small acts of tremendous courage. People who chose love over fear, even when the cost was everything. She thought about nurses and administrators and aging women carrying guilt like stones until they could finally set them down through sacrifice. She thought about fathers who loved from distance and mothers who died protecting daughters they barely knew. She thought about all the complicated, imperfect people who had loved her imperfectly, but completely. And she understood now that this was what it meant to be human, to contain multitudes, to hold contradictions, to be both the product of others' choices and the author of your own story, to be rooted and free, hidden and found, broken and whole all at once. Sarah drove away from Mercy General Hospital, watching it disappear in her rearview mirror, the building that had held 30 years of secrets, that had been both her birthplace and her workplace, that had witnessed her mother's death and her own rebirth into truth. She was going home now, to an apartment that felt different than it had a year ago, to a life that had expanded beyond recognition, to a future she would build with her own hands. She would call Daniel tonight and maybe make plans to visit Seattle next month. She would meet Rachel for coffee and listen to more stories about Jessica. She would continue her work with domestic violence survivors, honoring the chain of sacrifice that had saved her. And she would wear her mother's necklace, carrying Jessica's final gift against her heart, the reminder that knowing your roots gives you the strength to choose your direction, that you can honor the past without being imprisoned by it, that you can be both who you were told you were and who you discovered yourself to be. Sarah Mitchell, baby girl Lawson, Jessica Brennan's daughter, Daniel Park's child, Janet Cruz's final act of courage. All of it true. All of it real. All of it forming the complex, beautiful, painful tapestry of one woman's identity, a woman who had been lost and found, hidden and revealed, saved and reborn.
Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.